manager with a company called Blue Rock
Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. Before I start the formal part, I'm going to tell you right now, Chris will be real pissed off. Is that what that was? That was Chris. No, I say he'd be really mad that he's missing this. You know, he really would. He says, God. Anyway, Christopher John Deere, son, brother, father, husband, partner, uncle, cousin, friend, classmate, colleague, veteran, diver, and proud Welshman. Passed away way too early and with so much unfinished business. Endowed with the facility to make a new friend no matter the cause, as a lot of you, I think, can attest. Chris's legacy transcends the stories, anecdotes, and tributes we will bear witness to today. It will remain within and around us as we strive to live our own lives, guided by Chris's commitment to others and his extreme sense of loyalty to family and friends. On behalf of Tina and the Deere family and everyone who loved Chris and continued to hold him most dear, excuse the pun, a bit of Scouse humour there, I mean. Welcome to the celebration of Chris's life. I'm Steve Scouse Davenport, or Scouse Git, as Taff used to call me. And that was my name for Chris because he was in Wales. RCF veteran, RMC class of 1983, and Chris's longtime friend. And I'm honoured, indeed honoured, to be the Master of Ceremonies today. Today is a celebration, a reminder that a life well lived has the capacity to influence the lives of so many others. Like his dad, Chris always enjoyed sharing stories, yet never boasted. It was his nature to be empathetic, to feed the experience of others with his wit and compassion. We will hear today not so much about what Chris accomplished, which was a heck of a lot, as you can all attest to, but rather about the person he was and his timeless impact. Throughout today's celebration, let's take stock that it is the man who forged the friendships across the boundaries and who, without hesitation, invested that most precious of resource, his time, to support others who will be remembered. His legacy lives on in all of us. His strength of character and heart of gold will prevail. Thank you. So this event today is to be a flow. This is not a military event. This is a celebration of his life, as I said at the beginning. This is a flow. So people will be getting up, as per program, mind, to say their piece. Born on September the 5th, 1958. Yes, 3 years older than me. To the late Audrey and Wyndham Deere, Chris was the middle brother of Michael and David, who share fond and indeed colourful memories of Chris and his shenanigans, as do we all. Unlike his brothers, who chose to slip the surly bonds of earth and dance the skies on laughter-silvered wings, Chris was a Navy man, and darn proud of it. As an exemplary professional and an outstanding leader, Chris endeared himself to admirals and sailors alike. His success as a commanding officer, right up to the pinnacle as Director of Diving Safety, capped off by what I'm going to call his adventure in Paris. As a liaison officer with the Navy, ensured that his unwavering dedication to mission and to those under his care was leveraged for strategic effect. Ultimately, his devotion was recognized, as many of you know, with the Order of Military Merit. Chris's talent to endear himself to others was forged during our 4 years at the Royal Military College of Canada in Kingston. It started way back in 1979. Taff and I hit it off from the start. His interest in Liverpool Football Club solidified the foundation upon which our bond would stand the test of time. At RMC, Chris was a colourful, dare I say, and I had to choose my word here right, firebrand cadet. Other colourful words I had in my vocabulary, but I didn't think this was appropriate for today. Who, along with two other members of what we call the scholarship section, me and Greg Benedict, or Benny, his first-year roommate and other dear friend, so aptly named, by the way, by one of our professors, given our collective prowess to impress academically. Made the college experience an emotional-laden, life-changing experience that forever influenced our character and helped define our lives. Chris was a piper who helped motivate us on cold parade mornings. He was a fellow soccer player who, to some, is remembered for his stories of selling vacuum cleaners rather than for his prowess on the field. Right, Art? He was an academic who refined the concept of figuring out a course the day before the final exam. And that's not a lie. I watched that in practice. It's a talent. It truly is. He was a leader who believed those under his charge always had potential to excel, even if it was to run extra laps at Chris's behest. Right, Jamie? It was during this time that Chris directly saved my burgeoning military career when demons were at my door. He often made light of his intervention, how I never forgot what he did for me. From that point forward, it was clear to me that Chris was more than a friend. He was a lifeline. I'm confident there are many among us who could expound further in that same vein. His support for others was a constant that never wavered. We will hear later on how Chris's impact transcended the Royal Canadian Navy with an exchange posting with the Royal Navy. I was so jealous. Although he never managed to master a refined Scouse accent like mine, Chris touched the hearts and souls of the RN diving community through his strength of character, commitment to duty, and selfless support of others. You've heard that already. You'll hear that again, over and over. Chris will be remembered across both navies for his laughter, as much as for his outstanding professionalism. his ability to find a course or secure a trip to some fancy location never ceased to amaze me. Unbelievably, he attended a diving safety course in Las Vegas. Where's the bloody water? That said, what will outshine his military accomplishments is his ability to bring out the best in others, no matter their stead, through a tireless and unwavering obligation to those he pulled close. Chris was so loyal and true to his family and friends that he remains the beacon that will guide all who had the privilege of knowing and indeed loving him. Memories are vast and will remain vivid and indelible across the spectrum. Chris's family was always so proud of his accomplishments, yet more so of the manner, like you've heard previously, through which he achieved that success. So please join us after the formalities for a reception in this same place where stories can be shared and memories can trigger other memories. This is a time to celebrate our friend, our colleague, and our family member, and our loved one. Rest in peace, my dear confidant. And lifelong friend. You'll never walk alone, Taff. Scouse Git out.
I'm not as organized as Steve. I didn't print anything out. I kind of have my phone. Thanks, Steve. Those words ring true for everyone here, I'm absolutely certain. My name is Bruce Walker. That's how I was introduced to Chris way back when. Some of the Navy guys might know me as Skip, but I was lucky enough to be Chris's friend. Chris was a really good friend. We met at Chilliwack in basic training, as Scouse said, in '79. He was so optimistic. He was the one who actually thought he could score a goal from deep, deep in the right wing corner. Like Messi couldn't do it, Beckham couldn't do it, but Deere could. He's also the one who could break into song on a whim. I just heard in the news that Paul McCartney's guitar was stolen in '72, and I bet Deere's house should have been searched before anything else. That guy could sing. Rarely on key, but he could sing. He's also the one who thought that Kirby was the greatest vacuum cleaner, and we heard that a lot on the bus. We studied together. We flailed our way through RMC with less than stellar brain power. I did okay. He excelled. He learned the bagpipes, the agony bags as he called them. He led his squadron and a band in his final year. His only failing in our early years together was that his piece of shit little yellow car, Mini, was only slightly more shitty than my piece of shit little yellow car, Bug. I'll be honest, we both preferred my Volkswagen because it had better suspension so that when we're on our way to those early morning Navy parades, we could shave and still not be late. So the Volkswagen was better. He was a loyal family man, so much so that he was personally responsible for taking the alarm clock with him when he went to see Brother Dave's graduation. I slept in, I missed a ship, stood 1 in 3 duty watches for the next 2 weeks because of his loyalty to his family. Thanks. He loved his children very, very much. He was so absolutely proud of Marina and Brendan. I can't see your eyes. There's Marina, there's Brendan. He was really, really proud of them. And he was really, really proud of often repeating a story of how you could never get my name right. He called me Skip Walkers. And you were also very noting of the fact that my dog shit in your front yard. And he reminded me of that at every opportunity. He was strong. What's that? He said you did it on purpose. Oh, absolutely. I made my dog shit on your lawn. Yeah. Famous dog. He was strong. He was strong enough to withstand immense senior officer pressure, because he was a good naval officer, really good young naval officer. He could navigate like 10 men. But he followed his dreams to become that diver, not just a diver, one of the best, most decorated, most beloved divers in both the RCN and the RN, as he transited back and forth across the Atlantic with both navies. He parlayed his personal and professional expertise into that very rare diver spot on the ORO course, the operations course. It's a year-long course that the Navy does, where basically we learn about 2.5 months of stuff packed into 12. But divers never got on the course because divers, according to the Navy, not me, but according to the rest of the Navy, just didn't have it. Well, we knew Chris had it, and he got himself on that course. And then he managed to distinguish himself absolutely brilliantly academically as one of the leaders of the root canal course, as we were called by the instructors, because the instructors would rather have dental surgery than instruct us. Sadly, as we got more senior, we had to go where the Navy told us, and we didn't get to see each other nearly enough. Upon retirement, we made up for it, starting with the greatest and most legendary and most epic retirement RPC in the history of the Royal Canadian Navy. Who else but Chris could get the head of the Navy, Vice Admiral Ron, with his tie half undone, a beer in each hand, having someone else hold the microphone for him while he slurred his way through a congratulatory message to Chris. I really hope he didn't go back to work that afternoon. That party started at noon and ended at midnight. It had a live band. It was at the Bagtown Mess, and I don't know of anybody who wasn't hungover the next morning. Even those that didn't drink, I mean, just the byproducts of the breath in there from all the booze. It was very impressive, but only Chris could have possibly pulled that off. It was Chris who convinced me to reunite with our RMC buds. I was a little bit off the grid and not wanting to be there, but I'm really, really glad he told me to get back together with the guys that I loved, that may like me, but definitely I have a lot of affinity for. I hope I could thank him enough. And I kind of got a bit of a thanks when I was lucky enough to grab Tina and him and get him south, and we went sailing through the Caribbean for 2 weeks. I spent 2 weeks with up to my elbows in diesel fuel and oil trying to repair my boat. He spent 2 weeks with my wife and Tina dragging themselves from very tiny island to very tiny island, singing Bob Marley songs and seeing how much rum they could put back. He was a really good friend. And more than just your run-of-the-mill really good friend. He went above and beyond for everyone he met. He traveled everywhere and anywhere for someone's retirement, birthday, anything. The number of times he told me that he was going to collect some more air miles as he was on his way to the UK for another diver's dinner. Yeah, for one dinner he'd spend a week there. Nobody would remember him even being there half the time. Well, that's because guys like Paul Jones and whatnot were there. He attended both my weddings. Hey, every naval officer should have two, okay? The starter and then the one you really care about. Only Chris would get that. Chris would like that. At the first one, he froze his fingers playing the bagpipes, and he didn't let me forget that one. And at the second one, he dressed up as Elvis, sang karaoke to the wrong song. He sang Hunka Hunka Burnin' Love, and we wanted him to sing Can't Help Falling in Love with You, but he was dressed as Elvis, so we got half right. He was loyal, steadfastly so. He was loved by everyone around him, and I know it was reciprocated. I'll miss him. He was a really good friend.
Okay, I need notes for this. So, my name's Chris Servos. I've been Chris's friend since we were 14. Anyways, first of all, thank you, Tina, and the Deere family for letting me speak today. It's my honor. Okay. Scouse and Skip threw me off here. So all my family are very saddened by the passing of Chris, and they wish they could be here. I'm going to start off by apologizing. I've read through this 24 times, and I end up the same way as I am right now, so bear with me. First, I want to ask you, what made Chris special to all of you today? There are so many people here. It has to be something, right? So take this with you. I'll come back to it later on, but try and think, what made Chris special to you? They say sadness shortens our life, but laughter extends it. Chris has extended my life, so I've laughed a lot with him. So we first met in grade 9, 50 years ago. He sat in front of me, and it was English class. And I said to him, not with a good accent, but I said, if you're from England, why are you taking English class? Anyway, it didn't take long for us to make a connection. We were both airline brats. We shared our interest in flying in Air Canada. And the focus of this class was humor. This led us to doing our first project together. So we made a golf movie. It's sort of like a practical joke type of thing, kind of like you think of Happy Gilmore, that sort of thing. But so we didn't have fancy cameras, and it was a very basic movie. It was made with Super 8, no sound, of course. And it was probably the most politically incorrect movie you could imagine. Chris called it golf at its peak. We had no script, no dialogue, of course, and we made it up as we went along. And what we did is we snuck on a golf course about 6:30 in the morning with Dave and Mike, Mark Howie. Another story not for public consumption necessarily, but anyways. Anyway, there's only so much film, of course, so we had to do one take for each scene. And I can't remember what we got from Mark, but we had lots of laughs making it. I think, Tina, I think he's got a copy of that you put onto a DVD. I'm not sure. Probably, yeah. There's another one too, but yeah. Yeah. Anyway, honestly, it was an Academy Award performance by two very awkward 14-year-old boys. So at some point, if you notice anything, my name is Mo. Well, at some point, Chris said to me, Mo. And that was his way, Mo is the way he said it. And that was my father's name. And I said, why do you call me that? And he said, Windy. That was his father's name. So for our whole life, it's Mo and Windy. That was our names for each other. Nobody else understands that except us and close people. So I have many memories with Chris, but what stands out is the number of things we did that I would call firsts. Okay, so I'm gonna give you some examples of things that we did first time either together or for each other. You know, I did it for him or he found a way to do it for me. So when we were 16, we both flew to London, and then we took a train to Cardiff, and we stayed with his grandmother and Aunt Lil. And we had a great time, and two 16-year-olds in London, we went to every pub we could. That was great. Yeah. Other first, we both learned to fly together in Guelph. I started a bit before him, and I worked the ramp pumping gas at the flying school, and then I got him a job, and we both, Chris, Navy was actually second choice. He wanted to fly first. He really enjoyed flying. Chris was also my first unofficial passenger in an airplane. So by that I mean, I did all my things to become a license, but you had to be 17. So anyway, Chris and I were working the ramp, pumping planes with gas, but then our job at the end of the day was to put the airplanes to bed, fill them up with gas, and then tie them down. Well, what Chris said, he said, let's go flying. And I said, what do you mean? So what he did is he got one of the airplanes, he got in the airplane, and he laid down flat when nobody's looking. And then I got in, started up, and we took off, and we flew around. And then we came back and landed. He laid down flat again so nobody would see us and no one would get in any trouble. So, That was our first, he was my first passenger. Yeah. Anyway, other firsts we did together is we did a school trip to Quebec. Now here's a good one. Trip to Barbados with Dave. I don't know how old we were. Remember we went to Barbados? Yeah? Anyway, 3 or 4, I remember we landed, and when you get there, they want to know, the customs wants to know what hotel you're staying at. We didn't know. We were 18 or I don't know what we were. Anyway, we had to find a hotel. Anyway, we went on a thing called the Jolly Roger. Anybody ever hear of that in Barbados? Yeah. Anyway, that was whole evening. I don't know how we got back that night, but another night. Other nights, I don't know how we got back home. Right. All I know is Dave was a bad influence.
I don't remember anything.
Okay. The other thing is, Chris started RMC almost the same day I started with Air Canada. So we both started our careers together. Here's a good one. I had my first car accident with Chris. And I blame him, honestly, I blame him. It was his fault. It was all around, it's his fault. The other experience I had with Chris the first time was having Indian food. You know, Chris loved his curry houses. And we went there, we did a trip at Edinburgh, and it's the best Indian food in the world, I guess. But anyway, my wife and I and our daughter, we stayed with Chris at Edinburgh when he's on the Royal Navy posting. And, but highlights were we saw the Edinburgh Tattoo and the old course at St. Andrews. That was great. So then another thing for Chris, what I did is I have a small farm. Well, my wife has a farm. I just work there. But anyway, Chris came to visit, and I checked him out and driving my tractor and putting hay in for the horses, that sort of thing. And then the next day, I think he's a little bit hungover, but I had him dig a 1 foot trench 30 feet from my house by hand. He did a good job. Another thing we did together, I think it was December of '85, the HMCS Ottawa was doing a Great Lakes tour. And Chris arranged for me to come on the ship in Montreal and go Montreal to Hamilton over 2 days. Anyway, so it was a 2-day trip. Anyway, I got to see Chris doing his thing. He called himself a subby. Anybody know what that means? Yeah. Anyway, he was still doing his Mars training, but I got to watch him in action while he's on the table, and he's navigating so that he wouldn't hit either side of the river, you know. Anyway, so the first day we went through all the locks, and then we anchored overnight in the South Thousand Island area. And then next day we continued through Lake Ontario to Hampton Harbour. But for me, a highlight, of course, no, the whole thing was a highlight, but I had my first ride in a helicopter. I launched off the back of the ship in the Sea King and did some flying around. I got to fly a little bit, but good memories. Like I say, so many good memories. So in Hamilton, they had a cocktail party, and then I brought my wife and my 6-month-old daughter, and we had a cocktail party, and they were in full uniform. It was a great event for me and my wife. And the other thing Chris complained about, the captain, I think Beardmore. Chris complained that the captain spoke to me more on that trip than the whole time Chris was on the ship. Yeah. Another time, probably shouldn't say this, but it's a good crowd I can say this in. When Chris was CEO of the diving unit, there was a submarine that they were taking care of on that side. And it was from the Royal Navy. And so what an honor and privilege for me and my wife to do a tour on it. With the officers gave us a tour. I cannot confirm or die if there are nuclear weapons on board, but there was a row of these big-ass round tubes in the forward section. I thought they're hot tubs or something, but I don't know. Anyway, I got another story I'll skip. It's about Chris sailing a little boat in the Southwest Arm, and we broke the rudder, but anyway, that was fun. So what I've done for Chris is, through the years, I've had him in the cockpit with me, flying. And prior to 9/11, we could do it all the time. And Chris, you mentioned, he always found a way to do things. If there's a way to come with me on a trip, he did. So many times I had him to Halifax, from London to Halifax, and then a totally random time, I saw him from Tampa. He was at some conference, and he came on the airplane, and he made a comment at the cockpit door, and I turned around, there he is. You know, just amazing how we always connected through things. But yeah, I had him in the cockpit whenever I could, and he just loved that. And that's one of those things, you know, as a pilot, we used to do it all the time. You know, if I knew somebody, you're going to sit in the cockpit with me. It's not so easy now, but I had the honor of taking you and Chris last year to Barbados. You know, again, and I would have tried to do it right now too, but. Okay. Other thing we did together, the snowbirds. David, Chris, I think Chris arranged it more than anything, but David was in the snowbirds, and they're going to do a practice air show in Comox. And Chris arranged it for me and him to go out there and do a practice show. Yeah, and like, for me, that's a highlight of my life. And, but Dave, your brother was very proud. First, he's proud of himself for not puking. But no, David, it was a highlight of his life, and he is so proud to have flown with them those days. Okay. So, yeah, as you know, Chris, very interesting career in the Navy, and he was posted to Paris to the École Militaire, and we were very happy and excited for him. When he got the second posting, I don't know who was more excited, Chris or my wife. My wife was there every 3 months, probably, with either my daughters, her friends, or sometimes me. I was only invited once in a while, but anyway, who here visited Chris in Paris? Yeah. I don't think he had a quiet time on his own there. Everybody was visiting him. So another first for me was dressing and undressing a man. So I was planning to visit him in Paris, and then I got a message saying he broke his arm and don't bother coming. And I thought, oh, that's too bad. You know. Then I thought, oh, wait, he needs some help. So I went anyway. Blair flew me over, and he visited with us. So I went over. Anyway, so I saw him before the surgery, and then so I went backstage at his place, and then after surgery, brought him back to his place, and everything was good until it was bedtime. How are you going to put on your pajamas, or whatever you're going to put on? Anyway, we'll skip that for another time. So many of my Air Canada colleagues, through Mike and myself and various people, they're here, some are here today. They would visit Chris in Paris. And so like I say, Chris had very little time on his own there. He always had somebody dropping in, even for an evening, for a few drinks or dinner, that sort of thing. He had so many visitors there. So again, I'm going to come back to what made Chris special to all of you today. Think of something specific and cherish it. Why did you become friends with Chris in the first place? Obviously, he meant something important to you. Chris has had and has many friends from all over the world. It was always easy for him to meet new people. Just recently met the Charlottetown retired Air Canada pilots, and instantly now he's invited every month to their lunch, right? But it was that easy for him to be accepted, and much like how he became our friend. Chris always talked about his best friends. He had many. I could take the honor of being a best friend from high school, but I was not the only one. He had many best friends from high school. He had best friends from RMC, not just one, but many. Benny, you, Skip. He told me about best friends from Mars training. Then he was posted to HMCS Ottawa, more best friends. He was posted to Scotland with Royal Navy, more best friends. He became a diver, more best friends. He went to École Militaire in Paris, more best friends. He was CEO of the diving unit, more best friends. He went to Paris second time, more best friends. And this is not to say that you are not special. He genuinely felt all of you were his best friend. So how is it? Sorry, I need one drink. So how is it that someone can endear himself to so many people? When you first meet Chris, he would ask questions about you, your career, family, trips you went on, sports teams. He would find a connection with you. He was interested in you. He made you feel special and listened to. It is a quality that we all wish we had more of. Through the years, we would not see each other for long stretches of time. And for many of you, it's probably the same way. But it never took long for us to pick up where we left off years prior. Our conversation would continue as if it was yesterday. When Chris would come to visit at my house, he was more interested in talking to my kids. He wanted to know what was going on in their lives, how school was going, what their future plans were. And they would be eager to talk to him in return because he was so interested in them, genuinely interested. Right through when they're growing up as preteens, teens, young adults, and then into marriage. He wanted to know what was going on in their life. He would offer validation, but sometimes he'd spend so much time with them, I'd say, like, you're here to see me, not them. I felt kind of jealous sometimes. But that is what endeared him to everybody, young and old. And anyway, that's some of what made Chris special to me and my family. So, okay, this is the tough part. So another first for me with Chris is speaking at his funeral. I did not really want to do this. Okay. Give me a minute. Okay, I was lucky enough to see Chris before he died. Anyways, a few things. And my wife is very good at this. She broke it down for me. But so I was there in the hospital. I got there about 6:30, and he died about 11. So I was there with Tina and Marina, and so we were all together. And one thing that Mike and Tina said to me is that when we talk to him, he does hear us. So, okay, that's good. Nice to know. So anyway, Tina, what she did, she left, so I'd spend some time with Chris. But when she said goodbye to Chris, she kissed him on the lips. And even though the whole time I was there, Chris did not move. Also, he didn't say anything. But when she kissed him on the lips, he kissed her back. And my wife later explained to me that a signal means he was hearing us. He was still going on in the head. He couldn't move, couldn't do anything, but he still knew what was going on. So anyway, after Tina left, I talked to him for about an hour. And it's good to know that he heard me. So Chris may have left this world, but he's still alive in our hearts and minds. So long, my friends. My friend, you'll remember to live on with all of us.
I guess I'll have to put all my ditties I have aside. That was very emotional and, to the heart, and thank you very much for that. Good afternoon. My name is Gerry Reddy. I was asked to speak on behalf of the naval diving community, an honor that I thank the family for bestowing on me. Before I get into my words, I had a bit of a flashback when I saw Chris's Mini, because when we were in Saint Jean together, Chris said, let's go to Montreal. We went out and jumped in his Mini. And I thought I was going to die several times on the way to Montreal. So I said, Chris, are you sure? He said, yeah, we're fine. Anyway, I never thought I could be so close to the ground going at such speed. Anyway, to Tina, Brendan, Marina, David, Mike, and the Deere family. Chris was a dear friend and colleague. He was not one that I would speak to on a regular basis, but one who was always on my mind and in my thoughts. Whenever we met, there was always the customary hug. I know, a diver thing. There was a hearty handshake, slap on the back, how have you been, and how are you doing? This greeting was not reserved for me, but for everyone Chris knew and would run into. For me, and I'm sure for many, it was always a joy to see Chris and catch up. You know, Chris never forgot his friends. He never forgot his colleagues. His interest when talking to you was always genuine, and his concern was always real. He would never shy away from telling you his thoughts on any particular matter. Didn't have to be diving. And he was always ready with a solution. Chris was a true professional and dedicated naval and clearance diving officer. He embraced every aspect of military duty, not only within the diving community, but every command within which he served. I guess I could say every command within which he worked, but it was not work to Chris. He loved every aspect of his military career. When attending l'École Militaire in Paris, I asked Chris, how's it going? And he told me, Gerry, I wish I could speak French better. But I believe they understand what I'm saying, and I think they understand me, so that's great. So it was a typical Chris response, right? One may be up to one's eyeballs and mirrored, but the feeling was great, and the successful outcome was never in doubt. Chris would say on graduation as a clearance diving officer that the first year was a mulligan, but he never took a mulligan. His attention may be on the successful completion of any assigned task, but his focus was always the morale and welfare of his team. One did not work for Chris. You worked with Chris towards a common goal, a common objective. The accolades are many, and I know Chris would be embarrassed by the attention, but it needs to be said. Chris was a listener. He sought out the advice of his team and senior chiefs. He stood up for the rights of his personnel. He defended his people, and when required, he would course correct to ensure fairness and equitable sharing of the workload. Over his career, Chris took all challenges in stride. He challenged us to be better, to rise to the occasion, and to succeed. Not an easy task at times, but that spoke to his professional approach and commitment to the diving branch and the Royal Canadian Navy. And then there are the stories. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a storyteller. One thing we would always say was, one should not confuse the facts with a good story. So I will leave all the ditties for the necessary repartee over a cold glass. But maybe I'll tell you two. Chris loved his exchange tour with the Royal Navy, and especially as first lieutenant on HMS Dulverton. On his return to Canada, we had a great chat about his time on exchange. Talked about everything that he did, all the experiences he had, and when we finished, he took out some pictures. And the picture said, Chris, where are these pictures of? And he said, that's Kuwait City. So they were taken the night before the start of the Gulf War. And Chris told me, he said, that evening, he said, or that day in the evening, he said he was thrilled, he was excited, he was nervous, he was anxious, he was worried. He had the full range of emotions that one can feel, but the utmost thing he felt was he was honored to be on the leading edge of Allied operations in the 1991 Gulf War. I know for you divers, that's not the ditty you were hoping for. However, I will give you one more, and this involves me, but when I was visiting Quebec City, I was meeting Chris at Alexander's Pub in Old Quebec. At the time, Chris was the Commandant of Fleet School Quebec, and Chris's directions to the pub seemed clear and straightforward for Chris. Not so for me, because when I left my hotel, I took a left, or was it a right? I'm not really sure, and ended up doing a perimeter search around the Fortress Quebec. As I was walking, I said, I should have been there by now. And the Sûreté de Quebec passed me once, they passed me a second time, and on the third time they stopped. And they said, who are you? What are you doing? And I said, well, I know who I am. I know what I'm doing. I said, I just got to get over that wall. And, so I finally arrived at the pub, and Chris came to me and he said, Gerry, where were you? Where did you get off to? And I said, it's a long story, Chris. And he said, it's okay. He said, it's okay. I went out, I went and I got a few rounds of beer for the table. He said, could you just go up to the barkeep and pay for the rounds, please? That would be great. So I went and sat down. I was drinking the cold beer with Chris, and he looked at me, and he was pretty stinging in his thoughts on my navigational skills. And his solution was Gerry never traveled without a chief diver. May I conclude by saying to Tina, Marina, Brendan, and family, Chris was truly loved and admired within the naval diving community, the Royal Canadian Navy, the Royal Navy, the French Navy, Marine Nationale, our NATO, Australian, and New Zealand partners. He touched many people in his life. We are all better persons because we knew Chris, because we called him friend, and because he called us friend. Chris will always be a huge part of our military and diving family. He will be dearly missed, and he will always be in our thoughts and prayers. So thank you for allowing him to be part of our lives. Our diving motto speaks to whom we are as divers. So to Chris I say, strength in depth. See you on the bottom, Chris.
Paul Jones. I'm a retired naval commander. I've got two roles here today. One is a more formal role to personally thank Chris for his service and his comradeship from the Royal Navy. And towards the end of this, I'll be just putting out a few comments from the many, many tributes that were posted all over the interweb about the amazing Chris Deere. I'd also like to thank personally. I mean, these speeches are amazing, and I'd like to personally thank Chris, Mo, Servos, because the one thing I didn't know about Chris, I've known him for 35 years. I knew nothing about his life really before he joined the Navy. So, Chris, thanks for that. I know it was difficult tale to tell, but thank you so much. Thank you. Bill Kerr should be up here for those who know him. But sadly, he's 3'4", so you wouldn't see him over this. So, because Bill was very, very close to Chris, as we all were. But I'm honoured to be given the chance to give a eulogy, both as a mate and also a colleague. And other people have travelled here as well. We've got John Chappell, who actually was doing some of his diving minutes for Chris. And Simon Bound, come up from the States, who was another classmate of his when he came over his Modern Warfare course. And I had the pleasure of meeting Dave Allen, who crossed over the warm embrace of the Canadian Navy, along with Tim Bromwich, who's also transferred from the RN to the Canadian Navy, and knew Chris. I'm going to start with a few dits of my own, I knew Chris. I started when he first arrived in the UK for his Modern Warfare course, and the people in this branch, we put our lives at risk. We come across close near-death experiences. I know some people in this room have had worse than that. I'm going to talk about two experiences where I was actually with Chris, and they were effectively near-death experiences. But sadly, nothing to do with cutting red and white fuses in bombs, or fighting sharks at maximum depth with your air running out, or peeling off a limpet mine from a ship in 5 knots of tidal stream, which we do every day, don't you guys? No, his was medicine related and a light jog related. I'll talk about the light jog a bit later, but the first day that he came to the Royal Navy, we broke him. Because we all met up the night before, start of our course. Simon Bound was on that course, and we'd had a few beers, the whole course. Some of them we haven't met before. And the morning of, we all had massive hangovers. And one of the guys on the course, Steve Howells, Wolfie Howells, was dishing out Brufen as the medicine of choice for naval officers to cure headaches. So Chris said, "Well, what's this?" "Oh, it's Brufen, mate. It'll sort your headache out." And what Chris didn't know, and what we didn't know, obviously, he was massively allergic to ibuprofen. And this is absolutely Jen. He was literally within, I think, about 5 minutes. It was like a cartoon, like bing, 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 bing. These red dots came out in his face. He started, his eyes and his mouth started puffing up. he was whipped off to sick bay and then whipped off to the A&E at the local hospital to get pumped up with atropine. So we saw him later on that evening, and he said, well, gee, thanks, guys. You know, day one, and you nearly killed me. He got his own back, though, because at the end of the course, the divers amongst us, now we were in awe of him, because actually he'd been a clearance diver for 2 years, I think, at that stage, and we'd literally just got our ticket to dive. So he was, we were very much in awe of him, but at the end of our course, he would get a report for his, I think about 4 months, I think, the mine warfare bit, but we were getting our annual report. So the deal was we'd all show each other our reports, or the flimsies. I don't know if you get the same in the Canadian Navy. You just get this little chip, it's like a watered-down version of what your report was. And I went in and had my report read to me, very proud of the results. And the standard phrase that the Royal Navy used to use back in the day was, for young officers, was, for me, it was, Jones has the potential to become an above-average naval officer. On my flimsy, there was a typo, which I hadn't spotted, but Chris did. And I gave it to Chris, and he looked at it, and he said, hey, Jonesy, it says, Jones has the potential to become an average naval officer. And it was really tight, but he never let me forget that. Every bloody time I met him, and in company, hey, Jonesy, how's it going? You know, have you made the average, you know, you got there? Yeah. Now, we are very lucky to have a Royal Navy and a Royal Canadian Navy exchange. It's amazing. And you do send us your brightest and your best. And Jim Penman. Is he here today, by the way? Great. And Jim Penman. No, he was a good egg. We liked him. And Chris was definitely your brightest and best. I mean, he's just amazing. Everyone in this room, I think, knows the fact that he was ops officer of HMS Brocklesby, one of our hunt class, and then he went to Dulverton, HMS Dulverton, another hunt class, as a second in command, as the executive officer, and he took that ship to war. Off it went to the Gulf War in '91. And I'm proud and privileged to be able to think that he actually kept British sailors safe on his watch in a wartime scenario. So, and we thank him for that. With great reluctance, we gave him back to you, but we never lost him because he came to almost every diver's dinner. He did. I mean, there's very few. I mean, he's got a decent excuse this year, sorry to say, but and he will be toasted this year, by the way. For those who don't know, we will be toasting him massively in November when we get around to our divers dinner. But he would turn up at every divers dinner, and I was going through some photographs, all the photographs. I'm thinking, my God, he was just his fixture. So he never lost his links with the Royal Navy, and he made the effort every year almost to fly over the Atlantic to come and see us. And also our careers aligned to a certain extent because when I was the mine warfare rep for the UK, and Chris was the same for Canada, so we had loads of NATO meetings. And he's professional, even though we were great mates. We had a couple of Barneys, you know, we would have a bit of an argument across the table because they did it in alphabetical order. So, of course, Canada was on the other side of the room to the United Kingdom. I'll be sat next to an American who, all of the mine warfare reps, the Belgians, the Dutch, the Danes, the Canadians, the Brits, were steeped in mine warfare. You know, you saw the same faces, they knew what they were talking about. And the American was always, you always thought that morning he'd been told that he was the mine warfare rep for the United States, because he knew all. But, so our careers absolutely aligned. So, along with many of you, and I was lucky enough to have loads and loads of mine warfare related NATO meetings in Sweden. I'm going to read them all out here now. I met with him in Paris because I was on when I was at the staff college with Skip, who I've not seen Skip for 20 odd years. The magic is working, by the way. I'm meeting up with people I've not seen for decades, and it's amazing. So thank you, Chris. Brussels, obviously, Sweden, a little bit more about that later. Vancouver, Sydney, Australia, I mean, everywhere. And then, of course, Scotland, England, Wales. I was lucky enough to meet his grandmother. We met up in Cardiff. I was brought up just down the road in Newport, and a fellow Welshman. And I'm pleased that his Welshness has been mentioned. I've seen the flag pop up a few times as well. Look at that Hampstead butt. Yeah, that's where are you? In the room somewhere. So I'm going to get on with the final dit, the Sweden dit. But I just want to pay some tell you about some tributes that came in. As I said, we had literally pages and pages of tributes that came in. So I've just picked 5 at random. And I'll read those out now. So this is the more formal thing. So from Commander Tim Kerr, these are all clearance divers that worked with Chris and knew him very well. Tim Kerr, really, really sad news. A great loss to the diving and mine countermeasures community in Canada and of the United Kingdom. I will miss his friendship, his enthusiasm, and ever-present good humour. A man of the first water and a true bonheur tout sur clair. Excuse my pronunciation. My deep and heartfelt condolences to Tina and all his family. He was taken much too soon. Commander Simon Nicholson, who was ex-superintendent of diving. Terribly, terribly sad news. A true friend and a buddy to many of our branch. His far too early passing must be devastating for his family, and it's hard to bear for his many friends on both sides of the Atlantic. Rest in peace, Chris. You will live on, because your courageous and spirited memory serves to encourage and inspire the hard-pressed professionals of today. Simon Bound, who's here today. Chris represented the very best of the branch, both in the Royal Navy and the Royal Canadian Navy. His entire career was spent in the service of his country. There was no kinder and no more affable man than Chris. Rest in peace. And just 2 more. Captain Colin Welburn, who was his ensign commander during the Gulf War. A very sad day. I'm feeling quite numb that my wingman has died. A friendship forged in war. The magnificent people that were Dulverton, Gulf 91, and in subsequent years. A true friend and family man. He had a passion, commitment, humility, and courage in spades. I'm a better person for knowing him. My heart goes out to Tina, Brendan, and Marina. It'll be a long time before a man of his calibre walks our way. A candle burns in St. Peter's. And then finally from Commander Pete Greenwood, incredibly sad news. Chris was such an outstanding ambassador for not only Canada, but also for the United Kingdom, NATO, and ABCANS. I always thought of him as an outstanding Royal Navy mine clearance diver, just with a Canadian accent. A really larger-than-life man, always with a smile on his face and up for anything. 5 bells, buddy. And there were tons of these. I'll be here for an hour if I took them all. So my final note, as I knew Chris extremely well, and lots of this. I mean, somebody said it earlier on about his best friends. He's just got tons and tons of best friends, and he made the effort to maintain those friendships. When he was his leaving due, I was asked to write, send a story, and I sent a story in. And I'm pretty sure it made it, but if it didn't make it, you're going to hear it again. I actually at one of the diving conferences we had in Vancouver, this particular incident, and it was an incident, had happened the year before. So again, if you've heard it, then tough, because I want to say it again. So the background to this, and I'm going to read out word for word what I sent through about this thing about Chris. It was a NATO conference in Sweden. Who aren't in NATO, but there you go. And it was, and we were in deep, deep snow. It was back end of February, so we were in this hotel in the Bundu. And this is what I sent, word for word. Okay. NATO are holding a diving conference in Sweden, a country, incidentally, which is not in NATO. Another example of how divers continue to manipulate world affairs. And the venue was a lovely but secluded hotel nestled deep in Scandinavian snow on the outskirts of a small town called Luleå in the north of the country. I had decided to go for a short but bracing post-meeting light jog in late winter in northern Sweden, and Chris wanted to join me. After I pointed out that we were just below the Arctic Circle and in the middle of nowhere, so had to be careful, Chris said, and I quote, "I don't need to be told about running in these conditions. I'm from Canada." So, placing my trust in him and wearing nothing more than T-shirts and shorts and carrying nothing else but my small camera with photos to prove it, we jogged off across the frozen landscape into a large forest, happy in the knowledge that I was in the company of both a dear friend, a supremely experienced winter runner, and above all, a Canadian diving officer. Wind the clock forward 3 hours. After being completely lost and in now darkening Arctic wilderness, experiencing plummeting temperatures, in our T-shirts and shorts, don't forget, and blindly climbing through knee-high snow to find a desolate, unlit road, 2 frozen figures finally staggered into a hotel foyer. I present this short tale concerning Chris Deere. This was written, when did he retire? I mean, it was I present this short tale concerning Chris Deere because the moral of this story is twofold. If you are running in Arctic conditions in somebody else's country, then perhaps consider carrying a useful piece of safety equipment, such as GPS, or a mobile phone, or a small day sack with some warm clothing. Anything, quite literally anything, is more useful than carrying a fucking camera. And secondly, in any diving-related or bomb disposal scenario, or in a Sea State 10, when the shit hits the fan and you need help, you can completely trust a Canadian diver with your life. In any other scenario, and I'm specifically talking about bars, clubs, divers' dinners, and jogging in Sweden, never, ever, and I mean ever, trust the bastards. But we do love you. So I'm going to finish off by just saying, I love that man. We all love that man. And thank you for sharing him with the Royal Navy. I look forward to saying cheers or 5 bells or slange at the bar and sharing our amazing stories with each other and the family. Yeah, let's do that. And let's send Chris to Divers Valhalla in style. Thank you.
Hey there. I'm David. I'm the little brother. Great pleasure to be here. Fabulous, fabulous stories. Mom and Dad would be so proud. When a pilot passes or flies west, we call it, it's traditional to read the poem High Flight. And I've recently learned and been sent that there's in fact a similar version, the Diver's Prayer. So since tradition was such a huge part of Chris's strength of character, I have no doubt he'd approve of his baby bro to be able to read this and celebrate his remarkable life. So here goes. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the seas with regulator, rebreather, and fins. Deepward I've descended and joined the tumbling mirth of sunset-split coral and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. And this is where Chris would come in and say, joke slide, because obviously that's a poor rendition of High Flight adjusted for diving. So I am honored very much so that you guys would allow a pilot to give you do the Diver's Prayer, but anyway, here goes. As the waters close o'er me and the depths press in around me, I again sense the need of a greater one's care. While I'm slowly descending into every thought's blending, the instinctive diver's prayer. Though I grope oft unseeing, and at times with fear fleeing, from thoughts about what my dark quest will uncover, I'm constrained in my searching, for again is emerging the instinctive diver's prayer. Because diving's like living, we are so often giving no thought to the lifeline that gives us our air, till we're made to feel helpless and disaster propel us to God and the diver's prayer. Then exhausted, ascending, I look up as unending the pearls of my consciousness race to the surface, sure signs of the answer to my faith and hope down there, I anew breathe the diver's prayer. Chris lived a huge and full life of pride, joy, laughter. He shared it with all of us, and he took every opportunity to pass that on. I'm very much a better person because of him. I'm going to miss him.
I can't tell you the number of times that I've listened to Chris bellow that out in my living room with Grandma playing the piano. We brought up one of our really good friends from the UK, and she'd be singing that song with him, and off they would go for 20, 30 minutes, singing it time and time again. I thought it was stuck on loop. So a quick introduction. My name is Andy Tiffin. I'm a family friend, a colleague, and a brother in arms. Oh boy. All right, so I took an excerpt from an email conversation between Commander Chris Hatfield, his RMC classmate. And this, in true Deere fashion, is the Chris that I knew. Some people collect stamps, coins, and other things. I've been fortunate to collect friends. Chris, the Earth one. Every March 1st, without fail, Chris would don his favorite Wales t-shirt and pose, leek in hand for his annual St. David's Day photo. There are many iterations of this pose, equally as strange and wonderful. There's one on the wall here today. Chris loved his Welsh heritage. We'd go for dinner. He'd tell stories with his Welsh accent for dramatic effect. But before the night was out, he'd complain about service or the food or something, and somehow end up in the kitchen laughing with the chef. Well, sometimes it didn't end like that. But it was always okay in his mind, and with a shrug, he'd walk out. Many here today have been tossed out of a restaurant or facility hat in hand. Such is life, not to get stuck in the weeds, Andy, he'd say, as we walk out the door. However, I feel Chris would surely complain about the end. He would be so disappointed that he was going to miss anything at all, and everything. He'd be sad, he'd be mad, he'd be stressed, and then he'd rally, and he'd tell himself it'll be okay. However, I feel Chris would surely complain, He'd want his vast collection of family and friends to band together, to connect, to listen deeply, and to care for each other. He'd want us to hold on to the whole, let me try that again. He wanted us to hold on to the simple joy of being together today. He'd be mad as hell if we didn't. So for now, we leave him to laugh with the chef in the kitchen until our own tables are ready. So, in my terrible Welsh, I ask everyone to stand and join me in raising a glass to reflect on a wonderful life, a charming man, and a fierce friend. Yaki da. To my brother. Okay, this leads me into the next and final introduction for the afternoon. As I asked Chief Nick Serbu to come forward. Nick retired as Chris's coxswain, the chief diver of the fleet diving unit. Nick is a cornerstone of our community, and their bond was unique. I would always taunt Chris with a single question. The question was, Commander, who's your favorite coxswain? I would insist it was me. I would, even over on barbecues, We'd be over on the island, and we'd have Thor over there. Mark Simonson, he's here this afternoon, one of the biggest coxswains the diving unit has ever known. And I'd ask him the exact same question. So, Chris, who is your favorite coxswain? An unwavering response every single time was Chief Nick Serbu. I give you the floor, my friend.
It's an honor to speak on behalf of some of the diving community. I've known Chris for about 35 years, but in 1999, 25 years ago, I became his coxswain of the Fleet Diving Unit when he was the commanding officer. We were about 2 months into our job, kind of feeling our way along, when one Saturday afternoon, about half a dozen divers went for a recreational dive. On their return to the Fleet Diving Unit, they were arrested at gunpoint and taken into custody for poaching lobster. While all this was going on, I was in Ottawa sitting at the merit board. There weren't cell phones in those days, so Monday morning, chairman of the board says, "Chief, your CO wants to speak to you." Nick, we're in the shit. So he told me the whole story of what was going on. And we were told at that time that the Fleet Diving Unit was not to be involved in the investigation nor the legal proceedings to follow. So there was no stick handling our way out of it. But everything that I took back from that first conversation with him was his first words. We are in the shit. He didn't say they are, he is, she is, he is. He said we are, because we are family. And that's the way Chris treated us. It wasn't as if that he was trying to obstruct justice or to cover up for anybody. All he wanted was his men to get fair, equal punishment if they deserved it. So as the investigation went on, and then there was final trials at the end, there were fines dished out like between $1,000, $4,000 or $5,000. It wasn't chump change in those days for a leading seaman. But I guess getting back to the investigation side of it, the investigation could have tore the unit apart because they were trying to drag everybody and placate everybody. Did your chief ever catch a lobster? Come on, you can tell me. You know, so it was Chris, with his leadership and calm demeanor, that was the glue that kept us together. He kept us all together. He stopped people from being demoted. He helped along. He really did his job. And after this was all over, there were some of the leading seamen that came to me as coxswain and they said, wow, is that really what a CO does? They didn't know that COs did things like this because many of them didn't. I had the opportunity to talk to Chris about 2 months ago at the Christmas party. And we, over a hug and a couple of wets, we rehashed a lot of our old times. And I told him then that the diving unit could not have handpicked a better CO to handle the situation of Lobstergate. And there are some of them here. And I'll go on to say that some of them got promoted to be C1 and to outstanding jobs in Afghanistan. Well, I think that's about enough of that one. What we'll be doing now is one of the final things, 5 bells to Chris. Divers have communications, voice communications, but there's also other communications by hand, lifeline, or by umbilical. And there are 2 types. It's a pull or else a bell, which a bell is a quick jerk, much like ringing the bell on a ship. So a diver down below, if he wants to send a signal to the surface, would give one gentle pull, a firm pull, and then the tender on the surface would send it back down again, and then the diver would say whatever he wanted to say. 5 bells would say ding, 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 ding. So, for a searching surface, there will be a pulse. So in the case of Chris, is that there are 5 bells used for 3 working signals. 1 is that I found my work, 2 is that I began my work, and 3 is that I finished my work. So when Chris went on his first course as a diver, he gave us 5 bells that he's found his work. Then when he ended up going into the real diving world and doing his job, he says, I found my work. Well, now Chris has sent us a bell saying he's finished his work. So now we'd like to send Chris the 5 bells back again. Ding, 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 ding. So I'd like to ask his son, Brandon, to give his dad 5, Commander Chris Deere 5 bells.
I told you Chris would hate bloody missing this shit, wouldn't you? There's no more speeches. There's just a thank you on behalf of the family to everybody who came. Fucking tough Scouser. Some came from a long way. Some came because they knew Chris for that part of their life. Others came because they knew them all their lives. Doesn't matter. So you made the journey, and he's sitting up there going, thank you. So let's enjoy him. Let's enjoy the reception. Let's talk about all these stories. But let me remind you one thing. For everybody who got up here and talked a story about him, he'd have 10 about you. And 9 of them would be good. So thank you. Thank you for coming. Let's continue to celebrate Chris's life.